Have you interacted with a non-human?
I'm going to answer it in probably the way you don't want to hear. Like a glowing light that looked at first kind of like a shooting star, like a comet, but then it stopped. Like it was shooting across the sky and then it stopped. It was just sitting there. It only sat there for a moment and then shot off the opposite direction and just left like a little bit of a twinkling, where you're able to use your consciousness, your awareness from your consciousness, and though you're meditating in one spot, you can actually leave your body and go other places.
And welcome back to another episode of Extraterrestrial University, the ETU crew. We're in the mix again, and we have another guest. We made it through our first guest, our third episode, to be able to add a guest, and now we have another one. Excited to have Tim Archer here on today, but I'm pass it over to Tone so he can give the official introduction. These guys go back way back.
Yeah, thanks, Dundas. Lesson 4, I guess, as we call it, right? Lesson 4. We're not the professors. We are the students trying to learn all that we can. And I guess our guest professor today is Mr. Archer. One thing that I remember about Tim, we ran track together. I could always depend on a genuine, maybe mystical, fantastical, amazing conversation with this guy. They don't make people like Archer every day. We're talking a physical specimen, and he had some things that really got you thinking. And so without further ado, my buddy Tim Archer.
Tone, it's been a long time, man. And it's funny to think back to some of the conversations we've had. For you were always the one that made everyone laugh. And no matter how serious I was being, you would always come up with something really funny to say. Or some sound.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I loved it, man. You loved all my jokes, and it's about 50% of the people like them out there. So I always appreciated that. But so I guess before we get started, I'm not sure what we're talking about today, but Crooks, do you have any ideas what we should get into?
I think it's time that we talk about some UFOs.
Let's talk UFOs. So Archer, I think we went through tons of different subjects and topics over the few years we had together in college, but where it really came with the alien topic, UFO topic, UAP topic now as it's referred to, I remember we were having a phone call conversation and you asked me about my son, like, what's his name? I'm like, we're gonna name him Orion. You're like, why Orion? I'm like, I love outer space, and I really think that there's life out there somewhere. And Tim's like, what are you talking about? It's there's alien life that's here already. I'm like, oh, bull crap, Tim. I'm like, give me one piece of evidence. He goes, sit down for a couple hours and watch the 2001 Disclosure Project. And that changed everything for me. I didn't really go full bore into it, but that was pretty compelling. Stephen Greer, which I'm not a huge fan of, I'll admit now, but at that time he brought together top military brass, and all of them came together and said, I'm willing to testify and before Congress. So Tim, that's how you play a big part in getting me kind of into this. And then I'm the last few years I've really gone full steam ahead. But I guess, could we start, Tim, if you want to, because I think tonight I'm going to steal a little bit from Area 52 podcast. We're going to suspend all judgment. We're going to take in the info, and some of it I'm pretty sure will be hard for us to believe, because a lot of us have the mindset of it can't be, therefore it's not. But we're going to be open-minded tonight. We're going to listen to what you have to say. I don't know if this is a good starting point. If it's not, you can start somebody else. But I believe we talked maybe a year or two ago. you did see some sort of anomaly in the sky around Wenatchee. So, but if that's not the most logical place to start, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, starting from historical, like why there's any interest at all, I think it's probably the best place to start. And it's funny, like I had always felt that there was like something missing. That I don't know. I was a weird kid. I look up at the stars and honestly, sometimes ask like, "Come take me, like take me away. Like, why am I here?" So there's always something kind of in me that felt displaced here. When I was 11 years old, 10 maybe, I was sitting outside looking up at the stars and saw an absolute anomaly. Something where it was like a glowing light that looked at first kind of like a shooting star, like a comet. But then it stopped. Like it was shooting across the sky and then it stopped. It was just sitting there. Only sat there for a moment and then shot off the opposite direction and just left like a little bit of a twinkling. Which, as a 10-year-old kid, you don't know what that was. But I remember it scared me enough that I took off running home. So that was my first encounter with something anomalous. And when I shared that with my mom, she had then told me that that her mother had seen some things as well. So yeah, that kind of started the adventure of looking into this more and digging deeper. I think from that point, the curiosity just got stronger. So I spent years and years and years even looking into books and research, reading every story I could, trying to figure out what I could about it. You guys are as old as me. So then when YouTube came out, I'm gonna age us here. When YouTube came out and you started being able to watch videos and hear people's testimonies and things like that, that's when a lot of stuff started making more sense. Looking at research behind Egypt, ancient Egypt, and the carvings on the walls that resemble spaceships, having technologies that could do things that, or us being able to see the result of technology, I should say. Like we don't see the technology, but seeing the result of technology that we can't explain. And then, I remember going down some rabbit holes of things where there's connections between the pyramids here, and there's the things that look like the same structure pyramids, that basically the same latitudes, and on Mars, which then gets you into the ideas of, is our history only Earth, or is it our history involved in other planets as well? So a lot of it, is stories and research and testimonies from other people, just as you guys talk about here in some of your previous podcasts, Stephen Greer and some of those other guys. But then my path went a different direction, because I also come from a very religious background, and if I would say fundamental Christianity, we're the only people, right? Like, so there's no extraterrestrials. That would be a demon of some kind or something like that. So I've got this interesting twist of, well, how do I reconcile the idea of life out there and things that I'm pretty certain about with what I'm taught and what to believe and things like that. So that took me down a whole nother rabbit hole. Ultimately, I ended up digging deeply into, sort of the Illuminati aspect. This was years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Because when you start looking at different stories and different testimonies, there's people that say the Illuminati and all of that stuff has to do with extraterrestrials, that there's powers that be that have been here for thousands of years that have planted the idea of religion into us, that have given rise to things that we call, the gods, like given Prometheus being that person of extraterrestrial origin that taught people how to use fire, an extraterrestrial teaching people how to farm and things like that. The primitive man, that would be, right? It gets you on a whole different plane of thinking. So then I start, looking into those types of ideologies, and how can I reconcile this? I started looking into every religion possible. What were the differences? Secret societies, and what are the things that they're holding back that we're not learning about? And ultimately, I did finally at some point come to a synthesis of it. And what I would say would be the most logical, as illogical as all this sounds, is that all of this phenomenon, whether it's extraterrestrial, whether it's human beings, whether it's spiritual beings or anything like that, there's only one single core encompassing aspect, and that is consciousness itself. From everything that I gather and every logical aspect you can consider, the universe itself is conscious. You think, we think about it in terms of us being able to think with a brain as being conscious, but consciousness also has a reaction, right? It's the ability to be aware of your surroundings and then react to those surroundings. And if you just observe, we see it everywhere. We see that trees grow towards the light, plants grow, they know where the light is and they grow towards that. There has to be an element of awareness that those plants have. You can see different studies online. You can see different games that I believe there was an old show called Fact or Fiction or Truth or something like that, and they did this thing where they hooked up lie detector nodes to plants and then did like violent things to a plant across the way, and it reacted. And they did things like mentally imagining that they were burning the plants, and the plant reacted. So there were all kinds of interesting things that most people don't even look into. Now, this is all about UAPs and extraterrestrials, right? So this is, where does that fit into all of this? If you imagine extraterrestrials as like beings of consciousness, there would, just like anything that we see, there would be positive and negative, right? There's light, there's dark, there's up, there's down, there's both sides. So often you probably hear about different types of extraterrestrials, some possibly being good, some possibly being bad. Reptilian versus Palladian. You also have different levels, just like we have different levels of intelligence in human beings. You have your infants, you have your toddlers, you grow up and you get smarter and you learn things. Well, across the vast amounts of the universe, the same thing occurs. Certainly there's technological advances where there's extraterrestrials that are more advanced technologically than others, but more than that, the highest level of technology is actually consciousness, is the ability to tap into that infinite expansion of what the universe actually is, which is an energy of awareness. So now, as you get deeper into these podcasts, I don't know if you've already talked about, I can't remember, about interdimensional beings. Stephen Greer talks a lot about those. A lot of the now former former black ops or secret underground military officials that are coming out and talking about interdimensional beings and things like that. That's where all this stuff's to come into play. So very different topic, I know. But I think it would be easier for me to go through because there's so much of it, that if you had like specific questions.
Yeah, Tim, I can see that, you're laying the groundwork, and I've talked to you quite a bit, and it is challenging to be able to build this, foundation. And then you're like, okay, where's my springboard here? But you are connecting some important dots. Even David Grush's testimony to Congress, he was saying, ET University is a fun name, but at least what I've looked into is extraterrestrials might be the least likely scenario. And so don't feel like you're coming into something where it's like, oh, we're just talking about ETs or UAP. And the thing is, when you have the nuts and bolts craft, that's fascinating, right? That's crazy. That's unreal. But what's inside of these things? And that's where I think, Tim, we're ready. I wanted to make a point about Diana Walsh Pasulka. She has 2 books that I read, and she's across, in the UFO UAP community. She's a religious studies professor, and she talks about redaction, where there can be like accounts of a sighting, and even like the UFO investigators, they will not write down people's experiences if they don't match up with what they think is supposed to be said. So there was an encounter on the East Coast where they would take down the accounts of all the sightings, yet when a guy said, well, I saw these people come on an airport runway, or these beings, and they got out and were moving around like ants, and they're like, we're not going to write this one down. Not even too fantastical, but all these sightings in one night, and then they won't write down the one person that says they saw something. So Tim, I think we're ready. Our seatbelts are fastened in our spaceships. Have you interacted? I'm just going to go for it. Have you interacted with a non-human?
Non-human?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Besides a cat or a dog, you know what I mean? Like, we're talking.
I've had pets all my life. Of course
I guess a non-human more intelligent than we would perceive ourselves as humans being.
I'm going to answer it in probably the way you don't want to hear. And that is yes, but with the understanding that non-human is actually an aspect of yourself. So, okay, one of the things that over years, I don't know if I told you this, but I went into sort of a monkhood for about 7 years, meditating hours and hours a day, seeing all kinds of stuff. And you would, in meditation, you could get yourself into a state of awareness where you could interact with beings. Now, in religious terms, these beings would be spiritual beings. But in a non-spiritual person, they could be considered interdimensional, extraterrestrial, something like this. I've, bizarre as it sounds, and you mentioned you're just non-judgmental, but
Absolutely.
there's a thing called astral projection, where you're able to use your consciousness, your awareness from your consciousness, and though you're meditating in one spot, you can actually leave your body and go other places. I've actually been to Venus, and as interesting as it was, it was almost like on not a physical plane, but a different dimension of plane. And there were other beings there. and they were just living their lives. Like it wasn't like, I don't know whatever the fantastic idea is that people might have, that on these different planes there's something fabulous going on, but it was just a different plane of existence, and people were just there living their lives. In fact, I was gonna say, in fact, all I did was I just kind of toured. I just kind of went around and went into some caves and looked around at some mountaintops, and that's all.
Are these similar to near-death experiences where people report that the reality is actually more real than this reality, or what was it, a dreamlike state where you're like, because like when I dream, it's almost like my thoughts amplified just slightly. I can't really see things too clear. I've had a lucid dream a few times, and sometimes I'll check out something closely and I'm like, wow, that doesn't really match up with how I thought it would look, and I know I'm dreaming. But it like, do you see 360? Is it more clear than this reality, or what?
When you say in your dream, are you able to consciously change your dreams?
I've had a few lucid dreams, yeah. Maybe
Few
six
lucid
or
dreams?
maybe 6, 7, or 8 of them, yeah.
Okay, so if you reach that point where you can become lucid, you can then tap into a more lucid part of it by actually commanding and demanding control. I know we have all these movies we've watched that are kind of like hinting around these different ideas and different phenomena. But there are different levels of awareness in the different dimensions. So there's absolutely a dream state. The dream state where 99.9% of the population goes to sleep at night, and a lot of people don't even remember their dreams, but they are dreaming every night. As long as you hit that REM cycle, you're dreaming. Then you have the people that often remember dreams, but have zero control. It's just the dreams take them on some sort of fantastic ride. And then there are some that can have lucid dreams where it's very, very clear, but you're kind of watching it. You're just watching it happen. The next step is where you are not only very, very vivid and clear, but you actually decisively can change the dream. You can make things happen. You can choose what to do, but you're still in a dream. What I'm talking about when I say astral projection is something where you don't go to sleep. In fact, what you do is you intentionally intensify your awareness, your focus. And a lot of times you can do things like using mantras to help yourself, mantras to keep your awareness single pointed. And then that awareness then becomes ultra focused into one point, which then can open up you into this other room. At that point, even then, there are different levels of awareness, because I don't know why I've seen so many things, but I've experienced many different levels. I've seen sort of the apparitional level, where it's kind of like this ghostly figure of myself that can go and do things. I've seen like the third eye, where it literally, your eyes are closed and it looks like what movies would show as like an eagle eye that opens up, but it's a single eagle eye that opens up, and you can do anything you want with. Like, you can travel with that. I've seen myself in different forms. There's a couple different forms, but there's one form, and to be honest, I've never been able to figure out why this is. But in one particular form, which I figure is the highest form possible for me. I think there's higher forms for maybe higher beings, but in this one form, I couldn't see it for more than just a few seconds. And I've done it a couple times, so I know it wasn't a fluke. But every time it happens, every thought, every emotion, anything you sense is like magnified a million times. Like it's to the body, whatever this body is, the soul body, it's so incredibly sensitive that somebody would have to become a master of absorbing energies and still be able to function in that. And I know I've met monks and people that are able to do that, but it's way too difficult for me.
I have a question that's not related. I mean, it's related, but it's not related. So one theory is that Bigfoot or Sasquatch is an interdimensional traveler, an interdimensional being. That's why no one can ever see him. Do you feel like there's any validity to that as you talk about the crossover with UAPs? I'm just curious because I know several people who are big into Bigfoot, and that's one of their theories. What are your thoughts on this?
Interdimensional, interesting.
Yeah, and that's the reason why no one can ever see him is because he's able to cross boundaries, or whatever gender Bigfoot is.
Yeah, I don't know about Bigfoot specifically. I mean, it's very possible. But I lived in Arizona for a while, and there's an area there called the Superstition Mountains, and there's hundreds of stories, thousands of stories of people who have been hiking out in the Superstition Mountains and have seen beings, but then they just disappear. There's a lot of stories about Brazil as well. If you want to get into, if you haven't looked into the Brazilian UFO UAP, that for a long time Brazil has had a deep connection with UFO UAP phenomenon, and interdimensional dinosaurs or Bigfoots or it's possible. It's hard to say because I do know that like I said, there are beings that are not so good and beings that are definitely good, that want to help humanity along, and beings that are basically just there to suck the energy off of you. And probably the greatest energy that those parasitic beings are that they go after is fear.
What is it that you're experiencing? Like, what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? Can we even use the five senses to describe it? I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, I know the difference between dreaming and reality. What is it like when you astral project? I just want to know, like, what it feels like.
Well, it's like I said, there are different levels of it where I had mentioned sort of that apparitional body. It's weird because you can't really say it feels like a dream, because I've had dreams also, and I know what dreams feel like. I've even had vivid lucid dreams, and I know what those feel like. But it's more, if you can imagine yourself right now sitting in your chair, you're not really aware of the chair. You're not really aware of what your body's doing. You're just kind of sitting here and talking, but we consider this an awareness. And then you look around the room and you suddenly become aware, oh, there's a table right there. When you astral project, it's kind of like you don't need your body, but you still have that awareness of being able to look around the room the exact same way you would if you were sitting here right now with your being totally awake, and just whether you direct your attention one way or another, that's where your attention goes, and that's what you'll experience. However, as I mentioned before, at different levels, the intensity of that experience can become so extreme that it's hard to you can't even handle it. Here's one thing I will say. Vibration. I'd read a lot about vibration and how everything vibrates, and there's a lot about vibration. But until you start doing things, outside your body, you don't really understand that. Because as I mentioned, each of these levels of awareness, there is a vibration of your body that changes with it. So that experience that I mentioned, where it was so intense that I couldn't even handle being in that form for very long. When I snapped back into my body was like, not convulsing like having a heart attack or anything like that, but it was vibrating so intensely that I couldn't even, I had to like calm down. It took a minute, 2 minutes for my body to and finally calm down. Now in some of these other forms where I talk about, sort of an apparitional body, or just the third eye that's kind of open and looking around, the vibration is much lower, though you do feel yourself come back to your body, and there's a reconnection, I guess you would say. But yeah, as far as like when you're in that body and experiencing it, I don't know how to explain it unless you could do it, because I want to say it's like being able to imagine something, like close your eyes and imagine something so vividly that it's actually happening. But I don't know how that doesn't really make sense, because if you're imagining something, for most people, it's not happening, right? So that's why I said it's the same as you being awake right now and looking over and seeing something that you didn't notice was there earlier, and now you know it's there. It's just you don't have a body itself a physical, because you actually do have a body.
Is there a fear of not coming back?
No, not at all. The frustration is that you have to come back.
And what about that? And what about that place that you're in makes it so much to the point that you don't want to come back? What can you try to describe that? It's probably a multi-factor thing, I would imagine.
Well, I think probably the biggest factor of when I say that you have to come back, that's the worst part. The biggest factor is that the laws are different. Like here, you have the law of gravity. You have, the law of returns. You have all these different physical laws, whereas in that world, you don't. You could, like I said, the experience of Venus, or like trying to go to Mars, you literally just think it and you go. A lot of it is just more of a sense of freedom. There's no hunger. There's no, you don't have any of these requirements that we have here. Although there are laws, there are absolutely laws. Certain things you can't do. From what I've learned and heard from others, is that a lot of it depends on your conscious level. Whereas like you often hear about the star Sirius. Sirius is considered among like esoteric societies as like the father star. Like it's the star, it's the father of our sun. Like and the highest beings of our system reside there. So of course, one of the first places I wanted to go was there. And I couldn't. You get to a certain point and you're blocked. And I think, from what I've heard and learned, is it's not ready. And I think also I came to believe that a lot of it also goes back to vibration. That if your body starts vibrating at such a high level, because if that star is so full of high level light energy that your body starts to vibrate at that level, you can't handle it. So the only option is for you to go back to your physical body. So how do you train? That's always been my question, is like, so then how do you train yourself to gain higher levels of vibration or higher energy levels and be able to experience something like that. You know, a lot of the teachings say that's why religion teaches you to be pure, right? It teaches you to not drink, not smoke, not swear, not think harmful thoughts, even, because all of those things lower your vibration. Now, you think vibration, what does that even mean, right? But again, we're talking about a conscious level, a field of consciousness that most people aren't even aware of.
So in the telepathy tapes, they are getting towards some conclusions. Material science has always assumed that through evolution you get more complex beings, and then out of that physical place comes consciousness. And the thought is that we're getting it backwards, that the uber consciousness is the reality, and any sort of living being can work as some sort of almost like a radio that can tune in a certain frequency or station. And I know that sounds absolutely insane, but it does also kind of match up with the history of religion and different sort of, you know, ways of thinking.
Yeah, Tony, I'll say.
Yeah, so what's going on with, you know, why, you know, we don't know, getting back to, you know, this is UAP, UFO stuff. The telepathy element is pretty strong in many cases. And do you think, maybe this is too specific of a question, but do you think that some of these entities could be post-biological, or are they maybe biological like we are, just kind of a little more moving towards maybe like you mentioned, being able to interact with the star Sirius? Maybe, you know, like if we would imagine that we're more conscious than a certain animal, are maybe some of these aliens biological, or do you think no way, this is all just post-biological entities?
I think it's both. And part of it too, I think, is you know, consciousness is powerful. I mean, if you think of it as being the substance, the field of all existence, then everything has an element of connection to that consciousness. Now, this is, you know, a little bit funny, a little bit weird, but years ago, even back at Eastern Washington University, I remember injuring myself, and I was so frustrated. You know, we had a competition coming up in 2 or 3 weeks, a big competition, and going to rehab. And I used to sit and not meditate, but visualize the healing of the cells and the healing of everything. And there's so much research. I didn't know why I did that, actually, to be honest. I just thought about doing it and I decided to try. I just wanted to get better. But interesting, like later in life, when I started reading books and doing research on some of these things, there's a lot of evidence out there about the power of belief. And when I say belief, I don't just mean like, oh, I believe I'm going to win $1 million and it's going to happen. No, not like that. But belief being having the ability to like consciously tap into the awareness of the cells or the plants or the things around you, and making that connection and putting enough belief and energy into it that there's actually an effect that occurs. You can see multiple studies about this. You know, even kids' experiments where kids would like put up 3 plants and one had the word hate, one had the word love, and one had the hurt, or, you know, the word peace or something like that. And people would go and look at it every day and read the word to it. And the plant that had the word love grew the most. So there's so many things out there that I think we overlook. So when you talk about the beings, and is it that their biology is higher that then causes them to be a higher consciousness, or is it that the consciousness is higher? I think, from my understanding, even us as beings have the ability to extend and preserve life by raising your level of consciousness. There's all kinds of historical anomalies of monks or Taoists or people like that have lived extreme 200-300 years and nobody can explain it. There's even monks, and I believe there's even a monk at the Vatican, that the body itself is unusually preserved. Yeah, the person died, but the body somehow sustains, and it's unexplainable because everybody knows the body decays and it eventually rots out. So putting that back into your question, I think at a certain point, when the level of consciousness is high enough, then the body just kind of matches that. And so that's why you hear about some alien species living 600 years or 1,000 years or something like that, right? But if you then take the spiritual twist to it, there's also many stories of beings being able to leave their body at will. So just choosing, okay, I've lived long enough, I've done my service here, and now I choose to depart. How that plays into the interdimensional being UAP phenomenon, I'm not sure. But those beings that I think are non-physical, that, to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about those. The ones that are absolutely non-physical.
My goal is to not turn this into another side road because it could go that way, but I'm just going to throw it out there. All four of us attended Eastern Washington University. When I say this is a dorm, when I say Dressler Hall, what does that mean to you?
Ah, man, I just immediately the image of the spherical building comes to mind. Dressler Hall. Was that the spherical buildings, or was that the ones?
Yeah, they were side by side. It was Pierce and Dressler.
Okay.
People called them the salt and pepper shakers.
The salt and pepper shakers. Man, I was only there for a semester though, so and then we got that
for a semester.
Yeah, because I was not I was only in Dressler Hall for a semester.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, I got you. I wasn't sure because I was like, man, I know we crossed paths over a semester's time.
Yeah. No, I was at the track house for a long time. So.
Brian Cole was a friend that we had in common.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you guys are all North Central Washington or Central Washington. So do you guys want to say where you're from and kind of what it meant to you growing up that part of the state? I was more, southeastern Washington, but
you're closer to Pullman.
Brooks, where are you from, buddy? Well, I know we've said it before, but I think Tim would like to hear.
I grew up in Pateros, so not a stoplight for. Probably had to go to Wenatchee, initially. I think Chelan did have some.
Had a stoplight.
If we, wanted to go shopping or anything, it was an hour's drive down to Wenatchee, or, if you went up to Omak or something. But rural towns, I dug it, growing up out there, small towns, water, the river everywhere. Everybody water skiing and that kind of stuff. It was pretty good. Pat was just next door in Bridgeport.
Yeah, just down the road in Bridgeport. I have 3 cousins that graduated from Eastmont.
Oh, nice.
So I have my family. I have my aunt and uncle had operated a fruit stand in Orondo for 40 plus years, and so of course, that was the go ahead and go straight, head to Douglas County, or head across the bridge to Wenatchee and over to Chelan County. And so, a lot of fond memories of that whole area, with family stretched all the way from Bridgeport to Brewster to Pateros to Orondo to East Wenatchee and Wenatchee, So, long story short, we have that connection of that part, that neck of the woods. So I was excited because I'm trying to think, the last time I probably saw you would have been probably 98 or 99.
Yeah,
long time ago. So I'm glad that we could bring this all together. And I think it's awesome that you and Tone have stayed in touch throughout all these years, because as we know, life gets busy and it's easy to fall out of touch. So to be able to remain friends and to keep up with one another's travels, I think it's a testament, to the human condition and friendship, because that's we're fortunate. And the older I get, the more I appreciate it, because I just recognize, here we are in our early, late teens, early 20s, and then bang, we don't see each other for 25 years or whatever. It's, life goes too quick. So we got to take advantage of the time we have.
Yeah, definitely.
You
already mentioned I'm from Wenatchee, but I think maybe, being out in that, we're not quite the Big Sky area, but, being not in the middle of a city where you have lights dulling the sky all the time, I think may also contribute to why all of us kind of have the interest in this topic. So don't be afraid to look up at this.
Yeah, and with consciousness, though, I think there's something about when friends really click, just weird things happen, super funny things that just you're like, that just doesn't seem like that should have happened, but it did. Like Tim used to always bring that out in me. He would be like, Anthony, can you make the siren noise? Like we're in Utah on a bus going between a track meet and a hotel or something. He's like, do a siren. And so it was just a whistle, but in a bus with all the other noise, it really sounded like a siren.
And the bus driver was looking at the rear view mirror.
The bus driver, and we had a coach just going. And Tim would just laugh and laugh and laugh. And Crooks and Pat and I mean, Crooks got a hold of a megaphone, because we've been wanting a megaphone. And we just rode around Cheney probably for 4 or 5 hours, Tim, just pretending like we were politicians trying to get votes. I'm like, what is wrong with us? But at the same time, like, we were just living in the moment and just trying to have a little fun.
Well, and that siren over a bullhorn, like, that sounds really legit. Like you scared a couple of people that thought that there was somebody coming up behind them with like a ambulance or a fire truck or something.
Good times.
Yeah. Well, small town kids trying to find fun in a small college town. Something's bound to happen.
Oh yeah.
I often think about, Tony used to do those voiceover videos, right? It was so funny, those voiceover videos you would do, talking, with characters and then acting like they were saying something they weren't. And I often think about, man, if they had YouTube and TikTok and all those things that they had back then, you'd be a millionaire right now. You'd be a superstar.
We should have doubled down, and thanks, Tim. But Pat is like a level above me. The guy, he's the master of prank phone calls too. That's where it's like, it's not even Pat. It's like he's tapping into something else. And this guy, he was using my phone to call my friends, and he'd be like, well, I'm out metal detecting. And he would talk to him for like an hour, and they just crazy. But Pat's on a whole nother level, Tim.
Awesome.
The key is you want to stay in reality, but you want to just skirt the line of like going off the edge, but you never cross the edge. And so and they want to know more. I mean, there's been several people that thought that it was a real thing until you come up with a crazy line, and then they're like, you mentioned about that you got somebody had a bad pet badger that snatched your eye out, and that's why you wear an eye patch, something like that. Archer, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. I have a feeling this is going to be the first of many appearances over the course of the life of this podcast.
Peace out, Archer. We'll see you later.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.